It's kind of funny. Remakes in the film industry are so demonized, but remakes are so welcomed in the video game industry. The horror game genre in particular has some highly celebrated remakes. I don't even have to start listing them off, you already know the big names. Why is this the case though? Oftentimes, as a game series evolves, it's super easy for it to lose sight of what made it so special. Sometimes in this form of media, you need to go backwards in order to move forward. This brings us to today's subject, Condemned Criminal Origins. This game was an Xbox 360 launch title back in 2005, and the technology blew people away when it was released. There wasn't any horror game quite like it at the time, and to tell you the truth, there isn't much like it even today. See, back then, developers were intent on pushing boundaries not just with graphics, but with gameplay mechanics. This is somewhat of a lost art now, as pretty visuals have taken center stage while interactivity hasn't seen much evolution. What Condemned did back then was surprise players with the complexity of its enemy AI. Sadly, the ideas that this game brought to the table seem to have fallen by the wayside, as enemies nowadays mindlessly cycle through attack patterns just waiting for you to take them out. I want to discuss why this game badly needs a remake, the lessons that it can teach the genre now, and most importantly, what this game can learn from the current state of the genre. I was not kidding when I said there wasn't much else quite like this game. Let's start with the concept, and don't worry, I'll make this quick. You're a police officer investigating a series of bizarre murders. Along the way, you have to investigate a bunch of condemned dumps to piece together information about the killer. Inside these areas are primarily a bunch of drugged out psychos that'll attack you on sight. You heard that right. In this horror game, you aren't dealing with zombies, monsters, aliens, or anything like that. You mostly have to deal with psychotic people. This is a very difficult concept to make scary. There's at least a level of mystery with aliens and other monsters, but people? We're around people all the time, and on paper, this game plays like an average day for San Francisco residents. This game makes this concept work because it explores the cruelty of humans and the intelligent evil aspects of nature. This game's enemy AI is a perfect example of this. Think back to the last video game that you played. Enemies that stood in your way probably mindlessly approached you and performed their attack sequence. Maybe if the game is really crazy, the enemy might have blocked or dodged once or twice. That's not exactly how enemies behave in Condemned. This game explores the horrors of humanity by making ordinary foes act as human as possible. Instead of always blindly running right up to you to fight, these psychos will often hide behind a wall or a pillar, waiting for you to expose yourself first. Sometimes even groups of guys will hide and strike when they feel that the time is right. If you were to tase an enemy and they drop their weapon, they'll either try picking it up or try to take you on anyway. One of my favorite things that they do is fake an attack. Instead of just attacking you while you patiently wait to parry them, these freaks will fake you out and withdraw their attack just as you try and block. This leaves you very exposed, and this got me constantly. This may not seem like an immense list of things that these psychos can do, but this alone gives the enemies more depth than I've seen before or since. This is by far the biggest lesson that this game can teach other horror games. Imagine this level of enemy AI in something like Dead Space. Imagine striking an enemy a few times only for it to run away and then attack you again when you least expect it. Maybe in a game like Outlast, predators could split up and try flanking you. Who knows? Maybe even going for something more abstract would be cool too. Maybe you could have enemies that talk to you like ChatGPT would, and you'll need to obey what they tell you to avoid them becoming hostile. The possibilities are quite literally endless, especially with today's AI technology. Somewhere between 2005 and now, we seem to have lost sight of interactivity, especially with regards to enemies. We've gotten accustomed to the bare minimum and we've forgotten what it's like to be wowed by technology. Condemn makes these freaks feel like genuine obstacles to the point where, even in 2025, I was surprised by it. That's not a good thing. As I say this and I think about all the games I've played with surface level enemies, I can't help but appreciate everything that Condemn did. I feel like a remake of this game would remind us of how crucial enemy AI is to video games. Though a remake of Condemned could teach this genre a lot, modern survival horror games could also teach a Condemned remake a ton as well. There are some minor flaws in the gameplay here that prevented this game from becoming an undisputed horror classic. The combat is mostly fine here. It's a standard melee slash shooter hybrid where you can hold one weapon at a time, attack, block, kick, and use a taser. Luckily, the system never makes the player feel too powerful because the people that attack you are equally as strong. The flaws in this game seem to come with the lack of an inventory system. Let me explain. Like I said, you can only carry one weapon at a time, which becomes a major inconvenience when you need specific weapons to open specific doors, and you need a blicky to deal with other enemies with firearms. That's right, you'll sometimes need to use a shovel to open a locked gate or a fire axe to open a wooden door. And if you think using a metal pipe is good enough to defeat a guy with a Draco, you got another thing coming. I know this may seem like an awesome idea since it forces the player to start looking around for one of these items, but in practice it ends up just being mindless backtracking. Don't get me wrong, I actually love backtracking in horror games, but searching bodies for glorified key items that you don't really want to use isn't particularly fun. Having a limited inventory system instead would allow for more effective resource management. Imagine picking up a gun and safely hiding it away in your inventory for fear of foes with firearms. This would make the player feel a greater sense of satisfaction when their temperance works out for them. The same thing can be said about holding a fire axe in your inventory. You could maybe have to choose between keeping that behemoth in your inventory instead of holding on to a health pack. Speaking of which, you need to scavenge for health packs in order to recover in this game. Instead of keeping a stockpile in your inventory and having to pull from that, you have to use the health packs immediately after picking them up. The player doesn't really have the freedom to decide when they want to risk healing. You pretty much recover at designated points. Additionally, the taser is slightly overpowered. There's no limit on how many charges you have, but I guess there is a cooldown that kind of nerfs it. Regardless, in every encounter, the first thing I did without fail was whip out the taser to give myself an instant upper hand. Having limited charges in an inventory could easily fix this. Heck, having an inventory system in general could fix all of this. It doesn't even have to be a good inventory system, just something. The other knock on this game is the detective puzzle things. I guess calling them puzzles is a little generous. You really just need to whip out some detective tool thing and scan some item of interest in a crime scene. I get it, it was 2005, puzzles were uncool back then, but this is where a remake of this game could really shine. Adding even the simplest of puzzles and giving this game an inventory system could so easily bring this game from being great to being a masterpiece. It's also worth mentioning how the environments and ambience can benefit from a facelift. These condemned buildings actually look great, and there's a nice variety between levels and locations. Not only would a graphical improvement help, but I think that an improvement to the ambience would go a long way too. There isn't too much in the way of sound that this game uses to build tension through ambience. I feel like a few creaking floorboards, some distant screams, or some humming of lights would help significantly. As it is, Condemned Criminal Origins is a really fun game. There's no questioning why this game got a sequel, but I am surprised about this whole series disappearing. Not only would a remake to this game likely become a classic, it would push the rest of the genre to evolve in ways that haven't yet been attempted. I'm not too sure how likely this is anymore, though. A big reason I made this video is because the development studio behind this game called Monolith has recently closed down. After some research, it seems that the rights to this intellectual property is still held by the company's co-founder, Jace Hall. This man even stated in an article that he, quote-unquote, wants to bring this series back, but we shouldn't hold our breath. This article in question was published on March 4th, 2025, so very recently. Mr. Jace Hall, if you're watching this video, I urge you to give this a shot. There's more than just a great foundation to make a masterpiece here. Honestly, I think your original attempt was about 80% of the way there. What should be really enticing about this opportunity is that not only is there a lot that this game can learn from modern advancements in the genre, but this game can in turn elevate this genre to new heights.